Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for our first episode of Coffee Talk. We are here to make sure that we address your itis, which we so often get after we eat a very full lunch for sure. And so we are here to give you the energy that you need so that you can break away from that itis on this afternoon. And so before we jump into our episode, though, we're going to take a little bit of time to tell you about ourselves. And so, Shalea, if you will say a few things about yourself so people are not blinded or anything about who you are, they at least have some information about who Shalea is.
Yeah. Okay. So first things first, I'm a mom to a beautiful 4-year-old. I am the Greater Boston chapter president for AABE, which is the American Association of Blacks in Energy, of course. I work for a large utility company here in New England. I sit on a number of boards for NUI, one of those great groups out there. And I'm on my third degree. I have an undergraduate degree in business, a graduate degree in education, and this now degree in my bachelor's in nuclear engineering technology. But more importantly, I'm a lover of music. I love to jump rope. I love guns. I love motorcycles. And yeah, there's a lot more to me than that, but that's surface level, right? Yeah. What about you?
A little bit about me. So, I am a husband of a beautiful woman for almost 9 years, getting close next month. I have a 15-year-old daughter. And I went to Iowa State University. I majored in electrical engineering, but I've been the director of business diversity at Burns McDonald's Transmission and Distribution Group for the past 3 years. So a few of the things that I love to do, I love outdoors sports really. So that being fishing and hunting. I love to golf, although I'm not no professional like most of us would say, right? But I definitely enjoy the game, getting out there because it is competitive as well. I am also a musician and love music. Play the saxophone, and I love playing funk music, jazz, R&B, reggae. Those are all the genres that I was raised on, and so I absolutely enjoy throwing on a few of those songs every now and then and playing my own with. I also love to exercise, keep up with my health. You know what I'm saying? It's very important for us to stay healthy. That's another episode, but stay healthy as Black people. You know what I mean? And so I certainly try to, make sure I stay on top of that as well. So that's a few things about LeBron, just in case anybody did not know those things about me. And so
Wait, and you're also a preacher.
I am also a preacher. Absolutely. I don't know how I forgot that. We talked about that at the coffee talk when we were at the AU conference, right? I think a
Yes,
few people
yes.
I think a few people needed prayer, right? I don't know. I'm just playing. I don't know what they yeah, I feel like they may have. You never know after so long, we get to talking all of us need prayer after a while. So uh Lord help us. But nonetheless, thank you for that. Certainly something that I do not take lightly. It's certainly a very important work, a very important ministry. So I'll certainly do that. That is part of my weekly activity. So yes, thank you. With that, we're going to go ahead and jump into our first topic of the day. And let me back up first. Let Shalea say a little bit about what this episode, the name of this episode, and where it was really a brainchild for her for the name of this episode. So Shalea, tell them what the episode is called.
So, this episode is called The Social Issue of Environment. And as you get to know us, you will learn that I love science and I love stuff. I just love learning, right? Like, I am that person where my mom will say to me, when are you going to stop going to school? Like, when does it stop? And so I had heard about this study that was done at Harvard Medical School. And it was called a UV independent topical small molecule approach for melanin production in human skin, right? And so they only tested it on animals, human cells, and human tissue, right? And what
Mm.
they did, they tested really around mice that they engineered to grow to be redheaded, right? They were red haired mice. Um, and they did this in a lab dish with human grown cells. And the outcome when they injected melanin, they were successful. All three parts of their study determined melanin production was happening. And so this relates to the environment. I know it seems like this is crazy, but really, I promise you we'll get there. This really relates to environment because a redheaded person is normally a white person, right? That's what most people associate with a redheaded person. My family, I actually have black folks that generate red hair, but they are not necessarily considered redheaded because they have melanin. Redheaded people cannot produce melanin naturally. And so they, unfortunately, do not last very long in the sun without being burnt. It's almost immediate for a lot of them. It's unfortunate. And so the issue of having a thinner ozone layer is really affecting this group. Now, in addition to that, you have people that have skin conditions like vitiligo, people that are suffering from skin cancer, where it's difficult to go out into the sun. And so here we are, circle back to environment. We have this issue of air pollution, air quality, and now we are solving an issue that was created by a particular group of people, white folks, right, for our environment. And now we're solving what really puts them at a disadvantage, right? Exposure to the sun. For those of us that have more melanin, black and brown people, we are likely to survive a thinner and thinner ozone layer. Yes, we get skin cancer. Yes, we have a high number of folks affected by it in our community. We know this because we're not wearing any sort of SPF, right? Like, my daughter, taking to the beach right now. We're in the midst of summer, and I'm like, you got to put on some cream. You got to help yourself out, right? And old school folks in my family are like, she doesn't need that. She does not need sunscreen. But the science is real. Black folks need it. And so, how does this correlate
Hmm.
to the other part of the topic that we're talking about, which is replacement theory?
Oh
And
Lord.
Lorana, I'm gonna let you run with it, and we'll connect the dots. Replacement
Well,
theory, Laurent.
so see, this is how this all got started. You were talking about, the science of melanin and everything that's going on, and I was thinking about replacement theory because it was fresh on my mind, because of the shootings that happened, within the recent couple of months, and just while we're on that, we're gonna take a minute, real quick, just to say we're sending our thoughts and prayers to all those families who are in Buffalo, Uvalde, Chicago, as well as Philadelphia. All these recent shootings that have happened. We certainly send our thoughts and prayers to you all. It's certainly a sad thing. It's not. Is these sorts of tragedies are not what any of us want to see, and so. But particularly when we were talking the last month, and or maybe may have even been, I can't remember exactly when it was, but the replacement theory, which essentially is, in brief description, it is the belief that black and brown people are taking over the U.S. and essentially politics. And if black and brown people are overpopulating the U.S. to take over politics, then essentially politics and policies that benefit white people will be eradicated, thrown out, and therefore black and brown people have now taken over. That's my summarization of what the theory is saying. And so that theory, which also was the theory that the gentleman in New Zealand years ago believed in when that mass shooting happened in New Zealand, and is likewise the same theory that the shooter in Buffalo, New York believed in when he committed the mass shooting on those black people at the grocery store, Tops, in Buffalo. And I'm like, well, the first question it makes me think about is, well, who owns America? Are we? If the idea or ideology or theory is that you're being replaced, um, even if somebody is being replaced, it makes me wonder. Okay, what is really going on through a person's mind psychologically to move them to now try to remove those who think that they think rather are replacing them. So if you then feel like you have the audacity, authority, and power to remove another race that you feel like is replacing you, then you must feel like that this country only belongs to white people.
Well,
That's
being the majority would make you feel like that, right? So the numbers show that what black folks make up, what, 13% of that
13%.
33,
Yeah, yeah.
right? That's considered not white, right? So yeah, if I was a white person and I was looking at it, would I look around if I lived in, a more urban setting and say, oh, there's too many black people, right? We're being replaced.
Mm,
They're all over television, they're in the media, whether for good or bad. We are in your face. There's, the top movies, as far as the top sports, even in science and medicine and all these fields, you are seeing more and more black folks. And don't get me wrong, we still need more as far as I'm concerned. But if I were a white person, and if I were in any situation where I felt like something was taken from me, whether that's job opportunity,
mm,
whatever that looks like for that person that feels like they are at a disadvantage all of a sudden, right? Because sometimes you don't recognize that you are in a place of privilege, right? Already,
mm.
just being white. And so when you think about who really owns America, it's been stolen, right? We know that, right?
Yeah,
The people of these lands, we know that. That is factual. It was taken. And
absolutely.
so now to see that this is a real theory that people are studying, right? I would love to see some honest feedback from white folks that believe this, and white folks that say this cannot be further from the truth, right?
Yeah,
When I'm in certain settings, I am still the only black woman, right? That's a real thing. And so I wrapping my head around the idea that this is something that folks are using as a theory of empowerment to go out and hurt black and brown people is just devastating, right? Like
yeah,
I can't
yeah.
get there mentally to understand it fully of why you would think this, because logically the numbers don't support the theory,
They
right?
they really don't. They don't. Yeah. And
Yeah,
numbers are what really you would think numbers would help folk to realize some of the stuff that they think and believe in is really ridiculous, and I'm not bashing anybody necessarily when I say it's ridiculous. I'm using ridiculous for what it means. It really is ridiculous to think that, when you look at the numbers that black and brown people are replaced. Now, if you look at it as a whole, okay, I can see where somebody could, like you said, get concerned that their population is not the overpowering or the predominant population anymore. But at the same time, it's kind of like, well, why turn to measures such as trying to remove others now? It's amazing that history, and I know we got other topics to get into, but Lord have mercy, history is really about to go in another cycle, because when natives who first of all were here first were of no use or got in the way of whatever the agenda was of the settlers from Europe and wherever else at the time, their mission then became to get them out of the way, to remove them. Same thing with blacks, or Africans at the time. As soon as blacks were no longer now, useful for whatever your agenda was, which I would argue really hasn't been the case because we talked before, we built everything. Everything was built on free labor. So we've been more than useful. Well, I'm not going to get into that. But the point is that when when we get in the way of the agenda or we're no longer useful or no longer in accordance with whatever the plan is, history shows that they have gotten rid of us in some sort of way. So this is why it's so important when people start talking about history. We don't want to hear that history, and they start trying to put other acronyms along with the history.
right.
So like, no, history is important because one who is ignorant of their history is what destined to repeat it. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's a cycle that we have been seeing, and we will see more of if people are not more careful with what it is that they subscribe to. I'll put it that way. So, on that note,
Listen. Okay. Don't forget, if you haven't already, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel below, all that good stuff. Okay, energy justice, right? So we're gonna continue this theme here of the social issue of environment, right? So one of the most beautiful people on the planet as a person, visually, we'll take that too. Deputy Director Shalonda Baker was recently appointed over the Office of Economic Impact for the Department of Energy down in DC. And so much of her work, I mean, the last decade of her work has been dedicated to energy justice, right? And so what always just comes up in conversation that I'm sort of obsessed with is why we are not at the table, right? All of
Mm,
these things are happening around us and to us as a community, and we're not at the table, right? There's very little representation, as far as I'm concerned, for our communities when it comes to the social issue of environment and energy justice. And so my question to you is, what is it, right? As a preacher, as a Black man, as all these, as working in energy, why are we not in these spaces the way that we should be?
I really think it is. I think what it is just like with anything, any other table that we're not at. Number one, there's a lack of education. And I don't mean necessarily education available. I mean more so intentional, targeted education for the community so that they are more aware of what those issues are. And I think it's only then where you start with being very strong, very relevant, Lord have mercy, with the education that you bring to Black people and to these communities so that you can help them to be more interested. Because again, you're not going to be interested in what you don't know about. You're not going to be interested in concerns unless you realize that they are issues, that they are concerns, right? I oftentimes think about when Jordans first came out, and to the person that did not know about Jordans or did not know who Michael Jordan was, when each time every year when Jordans come out, they're not thinking about it. You know what I mean? Why? Because they either don't know much about it or they lack interest or both, right? And so, and that's the same for any topic that we deal with. And so, to your question, to this, I think the biggest issue is making sure that we are far more educated than we have been on these issues, so that we can be interested in coming to the table. Because sometimes we're not allowed to come to the table, but boy, when we interested, when we're invested, we'll break the door down. You know what I mean? If we need to,
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
make sure that we're at the table. Yeah.
Well, and when I go through this myself, I say, okay, it's access, right? So we don't have access to this information, but the power of the internet is real, right? Information is at your fingertips. You have a phone, you have internet access, you're
Mm,
connected to people. So access is not necessarily the major issue. You clearly said it, interest, right? Like we're just not interested. It's not Jordans. It's not the typical things that are preconceived to be what Black folks are interested in. Which, come on, we're so much more than just that. I think the biggest issue, just in being a parent, right? And don't get it twisted, I'm not a single mom, right?
mm,
But my mom was, and I still, in a two-parent household, do not have the time that is needed to have a seat at these tables, right? If you are working full time, if you are pursuing things that are bigger than just you, it's very difficult to carve out time. If you're not retired, right? If you're not, you don't have the space to attend a 4 hour meeting about where that substation is going to go into in your state,
yeah.
right? That requires that you take a day off of work. This isn't on a Saturday, Sunday. You got to take a day off of work to sit on this board, right? Where you have to be selected. You don't necessarily have to know anything about energy, right? But you have to be a concerned citizen and you have to have the time to invest and give to these groups that make major decisions that you will suffer from if you're not involved. You just don't have the time, right? It's
Mm,
it's it's nearly impossible. You are so tired by the end of the day just in working and commuting to then say, I'm going to take a day off and let my brain think about this major issue that may not affect me in the next 10 years, but it'll affect my child 20 years from now. That's a big thing, right? And then you think
mm,
about exposure. So the last year,
Yeah.
I've been teaching 11th and 12th graders, and I've been teaching engineering with energy in mind. So everything that we touched had something that related back to energy. And so the amount of exposure I was able to bring into the classroom and expose them to as it relates to energy is unheard of, right?
Yeah.
We went to different locations, we did all of this, but without me having connection to industry, what does that look like for our Black and Brown students? I don't believe it's there. I mean, when you look at the resources that are out there for teachers to go out and get to educate young people, and not to say that parents can't, of course, drill it into their kids how important environmental issues are, energy justice is, right? And be aware, but your kids are in school for X amount of hours a day. And if your teachers are not connected to industry, and they're already overburdened by some of the obligations that they have, and I can say it because I've done it for the last year, it's a lot of additional work. It's not just get in the classroom and teach, it's so much more. So if you have all of these hurdles, I, I mean, don't even get me to the point of the lack of belief that we as a community of Black folks, we don't believe in the system, right? There's so many of us that still are not voting at a local level, right, to make decisions on what's happening in our
Yeah.
communities, right, on a daily basis. So all of those pieces to add up to why are we not at the table, right? And so for me, I think we have to do better.
So let me ask you, what do you think? Because you talked about time and the belief, because I think that still ties back to, well, that ties it back to a lot of what people have been taught in some way or another, right? As far as what they believe about the system and so forth. But when you talked about the time that parents and so forth may not have, what are your thoughts on? I mean, how do we? So should it be repackaged so that
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, you gotta, I don't believe that in communities where you don't live that you should be making decisions, right? If you are not suffering from the air pollution in this
mm,
particular area, what gives you the right to come in and make that decision? Right? To say, oh no, we're going to put something else. We're going to put more toxic waste in this community because it's not my backyard. So I don't really care. And if these people aren't sitting in these seats to make decisions, then they must not care. That's the assumption. Not realizing there are all these other factors that don't allow us to sit at that table because we're
mm,
trying our best to raise our children and give them more opportunities and get them out of terrible situations in some cases, right? So there's this assumption that they don't care about their community because they're not here. And in truth, it's just other things happening, right? That take
yeah,
priority over your 4 hour, 8 hour meeting in some communities, right? For making these big decisions about where these issues are really going to be impactful. Right. I think that's one of the biggest things that it needs to be repackaged. It needs to be um, it, there should be something done, right? Like there's no reason for it.
yeah,
And do I think that companies that service certain areas, right? There are large utility companies that have Black and brown people that work for them. They're living in the territories that they affect most. There should be space. There should be some leniency, some grace given to those that do want to serve um, on these committees to make decisions. And that's not just utility companies, but if you're a teacher and you live in the city of Boston, yes, you should be able to take the day, or there should be some sort of rescheduling of that meeting that is more accommodating for everyone, right? Um, there has to be a better solution for those that are
mm,
living and are at the brunt of these decisions to be more involved. There just has to be. It doesn't
yeah,
make sense for them not to be. But that's a big concern for me. And I look at the facts of energy justice, right? I look at the air quality. I think it's 13% of African American children, specifically African American children, suffer from asthma as compared to only 7% of white children. That is
mm,
a huge disparity between those numbers, right? You're telling me that 13% of this country is Black. And of those children, 13% are suffering from asthma.
Lord have mercy.
Air quality is huge. It's huge, right?
Yeah.
You
And,
all of it, all of it.
yeah, and something interesting about you would say it's like it's crazy because if you don't have the time to be on the forefront of the issue or in the mix of the issue with the community or uh, you know whether whatever sort of forums or whatnot to discuss and fight against for whatever policies, all right, then you're on the back end of it. If your child is suffering from some of this stuff, that is being brought on by air quality and some of the other environmental inequities, right? That we're talking about, and then you end up fighting more battles because now you have healthcare issues and things that you have to pay and make sure that. So it's just amazing that it's like you can't win from losing for some, with some of these things, but.
Absolutely.
And I think so. I'll say this since we are both AABE, right? It's something I want to make sure to mention for everybody to understand. That is a huge reason of why AABE exists is to make sure that we are a voice for people that oftentimes cannot speak for themselves or their families on issue certain policies, certain issues that some, like you said, some people don't even realize are impacting their health and the health and safety of their lives. And so um, that's amazing. 13% asthma.
13%. Yeah, yeah. So I
Hmm.
mean, I think of my little brother has asthma. I think of all the people I know that are black and brown that suffer from asthma. And you look at, the vulnerability to climate change is real. And two of the critical components to that are really the pre-existing health conditions, right? Their status and their living conditions. If you're down in Texas, you're going to be breathing in methane all the time, right? The gas
Hmm.
is produced there, you are going to suffer from it. I can tell you that I've read over and over of black men in particular that died earlier from heart disease because of their exposure, right? Before 50, especially in those areas, right? So not even getting to black and brown people being um, in natural disasters. They're more likely to suffer because they're living in areas that are more susceptible because nobody else wants to live there. And so it's more affordable to live in those areas, but you are likely to be killed, suffer in some way because you're going to incur a natural disaster, right? Look at Katrina. Look at all the areas that are affected, right? With a higher likelihood of not coming back from it, not recovering from it. There's just and don't get me wrong, there's a ton of organizations that are doing great things out there, but black and brown people are at the front lines of climate crisis. That's the truth, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that is the absolute truth, and I'm incredibly thankful that Shalonda is in this place and making change. I mean, the position didn't even exist, right? Justice
Yeah.
40 is across all branches of our government to look at and evaluate what we're doing to make sure that underrepresented groups have a seat at the table, right? And that we're not affecting them in a negative way. So there's good work happening. But again, if you're not listening to this podcast right now, you might not even know that that's a thing. I mean, yeah, you might be in energy, but you may not be well versed in it. Your community may not know, right? And so it's up to us. And when I say us, I mean black and brown folks or people that are affected by climate change. They're affected in the areas of energy justice to do something, and that includes educate yourself, right? Become more
Yeah.
aware. That's the truth. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. I just that my heart is in it, and I'm full of like crazy facts, right? So I'm a transition, right? So this is you guys will get used to this of a did you know fact from me, and so I found this crazy fact, LaRon. I know you're gonna be so mad at me for bringing this up because it's crazy, but did you know? Did you know that koala
All right.
bears koala bears, yes, koala bears, um, and chlamydia. They're connected, right?
Lord have mercy.
Okay, so I need you to guess how you think they're connected.
How many are affected?
No, 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 no. How they're connected.
Uh, I don't know if they've been running around rubbing each other. What the word is? I don't know. Yeah, I
Okay,
don't know. I don't know.
so koala bears right now, this part is not funny. They are suffering from a chlamydia epidemic, right?
Mm.
Uh, if you pick them up and you rub their little cute bums, you're going to end up with chlamydia, right? So
Lord.
there's a certain strand of it that's affecting them. They're also the dumbest, and yes, dumbest is the right word, marsupial on the planet, right? So they fall out of trees and they sit there and die because they're not smart enough to climb back up the tree. They're interesting, but if you are ever down in the outback in that area of the world, don't pick up koala bears. I'm just saying, you will end
Lord
up
have
with
mercy.
chlamydia, and your partner may have some questions, and explaining that a koala bear gave it to you could be difficult. Just saying. Just
I feel like
that's
the whole picking up of koala bears is not something that I don't know. I don't know. To each his own. I don't know what people be doing picking up koala bear. I just don't. I don't even think about picking up a koala bear. First of all, I don't even know where all the koala bears are. You know what I mean? So to be think, but you're right though. For whoever it is that does know where they're located and know that they love them or whatever they do, yeah, just yeah, I'm with you. Don't pick them up because
don't pick them
yeah.
up. I'm just saying that is the fact that you needed to know today. The koalas are out here suffering from chlamydia. I'm just
Now
saying.
that is an issue with the environment. I'm gonna just say it like that. That right there is certainly an issue with the environment. Now, I don't know if we just pray to God that they're gonna become airborne or something like that. Where yeah, that's an interesting fact. So that I'm just gonna say it like that. That's an interesting fact.
Google it. I promise you, it's a thing. Look it up. I would not lie to y'all. It is for real a thing. It's very upsetting. I'm just saying, and
Mm.
I do wonder how we discovered it in the first place. I haven't gone that deep. I don't know if I want to know. I take it back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
who? What?
Yep.
Okay, all right, all
Think
right,
on it. Think on it.
okay,
I'm gonna let that
all right.
marinate. So that's the
Okay,
fact. So
that's a
okay. So
fact.
so let's let's bring it full circle
We gon'
to
we gonna flip.
to this segment
Oh my lord.
of the worth of your blackness, right? So,
Yes.
Farad, I'll let you intro this. Go for it.
All right. So the worth of your blackness. So I need everybody to understand. What I did was really what we did. We went out and questioned random people. Well, not random, but a few people on the. Here was the question: would you give up your melanin? That was to one group, of course. And then to the other group, would you give up your whiteness? All right. So I'm gonna start the response. You ready? You ready to hear this?
I think I'm
All
ready.
right. Here's the first response, and then that way, you can. Oh, hold on. Let me. Wait a minute. What's going on now? Uh,
No. As difficult as it is being black and a woman, there's just so much pride at the same time in being black and a woman and that connection that black people have to each other. Regardless of where we are, we understand each other. And I wouldn't want to lose that or give that up, even if it was easier.
Well, all right now. Listen, she Miss was clear. Absolutely not. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, when you think about it, it's sort of the unspoken rule is if you see somebody black, you acknowledge, right? We both black, and we may be one of the onlys, and it is an easy identifier for the most part. That yeah, I see you, you see me. We know we black. We know what the struggle is, and in certain circles, having that unique identifier of resembling a black person also screams excellence. It screams that you are the upper echelon within that group. So if you and I are working for the same company, I see you in the hallways, I know that you're the best of the best. It's a default, right?
Yeah.
And I know so many people that agree. So thank you, Miss Ma'am, for having that level of pride and being
Yeah.
honest that no. Mm-mm. Okay, what you got? What you
Yeah.
got next?
All right. All right. Let's see. All right. Would you give up your melanin? But you mean to be white, right? Yeah. When I was younger, I dealt with a lot more segregation and separatism and being looked down on for being black. And when I was younger, I would have given it up in a minute. Based on my time in life and what I've experienced and how I've grown with separatism and the prejudice in the world, and how I've grown in my spirituality, I handled it, I think. So I would keep mine just like I am now. I would keep mine. I think if I had to start over, I would still keep it. I'd stay black.
Wow, that's heavy. That's heavy. I he immediately made me think of the idea of passing. So
Mm.
it's so relatable for me. My great grandfather on my mom's side had blue eyes, and he used to squint, and I never knew till I was like in my teens that he had blue eyes. He would almost hide them, and it was somewhat out of shame. The story is that at some point, someone in his family was raped, right? So there's an intermingling, and things happen where certain what we know as white traits, right? Like in our minds, and I say that with air quotes,
Mm.
come up, and it can give fair skinned people the ability to pass in between two worlds. There's a whole movie about this. It was great. And I recently had a conversation with a beautiful group of people that had that experience where one of them could pass for white. And so another white person, who they're all great friends to this day for the last 40 plus years, thought for so long that he was white until a black person came in the picture and said, something to the effect of like, you're black, right? So there was this ability to pass, and there's a decision that's made when you have this ability to give it up. Some of
Mm.
the stories that we spoke about were very much of like there were black people that could pass and chose to do so and ended up coming back. And one of the reasons that they shared with me was one gentleman said, well, I came back because it was just more fun to be black, right?
Wow.
And it was amazing to me to hear that kind of um, idea and philosophy of like, yeah, I totally passed for white. I was in this white world, and I knew I was black. It wasn't like I was raised white and never knew. I knew that I was black, and I made a decision to go to the other side. And I say that loosely, and to then turn around and say, you know what? I don't actually like it over here. I want to come back, as if there's a fence in between, right? But I mean, we do it today, even in the world of code switching, and there's a lot to it. So it's amazing that this man found growth and greatness in his blackness over the years,
Yeah.
even seeing all the disparities and all of the negative that comes with it. To still choose it is honorable. That's the way that I see it. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I love that. So I do need to read one, and I need to tell you that this is a response that I asked of somebody when I asked them, "Would you give up your whiteness?" You ready? I got to read this because I
Okay.
didn't get it recorded. All right,
Okay.
so there's a condensed version and an extended version. So let me read the condensed version first. Would you give up your whiteness? The condensed version is hell yeah, I would. So all right. So then the extended version is I think the reason that was my knee jerk response was because in my mind I added to the question, My mind read the question is, would you give up your whiteness if that meant a more just and fair world? Which is such a
Mm,
white way of thinking. And I gotta add conditions to make myself feel better. Then the
mm.
question got me to thinking of more questions. What does whiteness mean? In giving up my whiteness, what do I become? Is it a different kind of whiteness, living your whole life in Memphis, Missouri versus growing up in a more culturally diverse city? Is whiteness defined as skin color or culture? Damn, Ron, you got me thinking now, and my small country boy brain needs a bush light to calm itself down.
That is heavy. That is man. I think of the idea of the white savior. That's what that immediately brought me to of, I'm white. Let me save all the black people. So if I can give up my whiteness and it helps everybody, it's worth it. It sounded incredibly genuine. I would love to know more and have a heavy conversation with this individual because I guess my assumptions, right, when we started to think about the worth of blackness, of your blackness, and what that means is really for future generations. Because
Mm,
what is the trajectory of your children if you are of a different race, right? A lot of what we do is related to proximity too. If I were born in a different country, I may be Muslim, I may be Hindi, I may be a number of different things based on where I was born and raised. And so, even the idea of blackness, I know so many people that come here, for example, from Brazil, and the first time a lot of my friends saw it on paper of black, white, they're like, "No, I'm Brazilian, right? Like, what is this black,
mm,
white?" You know what I
mm,
mean? And then more recently, my daughter was asked, just by family members of, "Are you black?" And she said, "No, I'm brown." So
mm.
logically, right, you start to think about this concept, and being as innocent as she is at 4, that was a valid answer. And would she give that up is not even something that she could consider because she just is. This just is. That's not an option, right? Because I would no longer be who I am because it was given to me.
Yeah,
I didn't give myself my blackness, right? It's not a choice. You wake up every day and this is what you are. So it's really interesting that that was a white person's response. Yeah, I would love to have
yeah,
an in-depth
yeah,
conversation with him or her. I don't know.
yeah. It's him right now. I guess we could tell.
Oh, okay, okay.
And I'm with you. I would love to like really expound on that and talk more through that because we were black people and Jim. We talking about like you said the worth of your blackness. We have been taught through a number of mediums to belittle, demean, cheapen, our blackness, who we are, our culture. It's amazing how, in circles of, especially the professional world or corporate America, we our black culture and even the lingo or all that oftentimes has been looked down upon, or we felt the need to modify ourselves and change ourselves to be able to fit in this space, this corporate space that's really been dominated by European culture. I don't have time for that right now. But then when I see and hear certain, I don't know, skits or whatever the case by some white people who did not grow up and deal with the challenges that I've dealt with as a black person, and I see them now acting like or
Mm,
trying to emulate certain cultural things as a just a fun thing to do, or just sometimes I kind of I struggle with that a little bit because it's kind of like, man, so you're imitating that, you're imitating the lyrics of this songwriter, or maybe how a reggae artist may talk or whatever, But there was a time where if that person came in to be their true selves into this corporate space, then they would be looked down upon, or perhaps even restricted from public speaking, or from so many other different opportunities. So when now, but now I do think that our generation and probably the generation after us, they reckon all that. They come in like, no, forget that. I'm staying who I am. It is what it is, right? And I do think that there's beauty in that. I think there's richness in it. I think there's a wealth of, there's a wealth that really can't be touched with the hands in being able to own and be comfortable and be proud in the skin that you are, in the blackness that you are. Now, there's some faith or theological religious thoughts that I have when we start talking about boasting in the flesh, but that's not the topic that we're talking about. The topic we're talking about is because of
Don't you
the.
do it.
I'm not gonna do it. See, this is when you're supposed to see preacher. Calm down now.
Don't do
Stop
it.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Don't go on that. Listen, get off that
yeah.
soapbox. Listen, the
Now we
podium is
leave
not in
that.
front of you. Don't do it.
So, but no, and all, but for real though, it is. It's amazing. I love it, and I do absolutely. I appreciate it. I thank God for who we are, the way what we look like, and the culture that we've been able to experience, breed for. I mean, experience and forge rather, right here in this country as well. And I think it's worth so much, and we should never let anybody cheapen or play us cheap just because of the culture that we have. So,
Well, you know, the one of
absolutely,
my favorite quotes is the first sign of intelligence is being able to speak multiple languages. And I will tell you that Black folks speak multiple languages, right? Whether that's in our rhythms and music, whether that is in what we called at one point ebonics, I'll call it code switching, whatever that looks like. We speak multiple languages in multiple spheres of our life, right? Um, the ability to do that is incredible. You know, I see young people do it. They know what a corporate setting is like and what they should do. They know what it like, to keep your eyes up on, an inner city street. They know what it is to operate in all these different environments. And my biggest thing is I hope that I can continue to empower young people to hold on to that, right? To be exactly who you are and prove at every space that you can and continue to provide opportunities for young people. That's where I'm at. Like I love this topic because I think it really made people think for a moment about what just their melanin or lack thereof means to them in
yeah,
such a
yeah,
larger view, right? I encourage people to think about it, to ask somebody random, or ask somebody would you give it up? And think about it and walk through that process of what that actually means to you and others, right?
yeah,
I think,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, for sure. Well, I have plenty more sound bites. Maybe there's something we can still make sure is put out there, and so and because you're right, understanding these are things, these are topics that folk need to think more deeply about, in my opinion. You know what I mean,
yeah.
and ask themselves what are potential psychological barriers or triggers that we have just based on the color of somebody or the blackness or the melanin or the lack thereof that a person may have, right? Yeah, because all those things are impacted. So I think we are at time. I think we had time, and so with that, we want to make sure that we send some last words for everybody that has been tuned in on today. Thank you again for tuning in. But we want to challenge you. We don't want to just leave you with, just this conversation that LaRon and Shalea had. You all technically in our minds and in our hearts have been with us here in this conversation, just like the conversation happened when we were at the AABE conference back in May. And so with that being said, we don't want to leave this conversation without charging and challenging everybody that has been tuned in. And one of the things that we want to charge you with is with a question. Number one, do you know what the current environmental justice stats or energy justice stats are for your community? Do you know what those are? Do you know what the air quality stats are? Do you know how those things are impacting your community right now? And so we challenge you to find out what those stats are in your community and identify 2 to 3 actions that you want to take and get involved. Do something That's what we're talking about. Just do something. Be interested. Be involved. Right. And you might just share this podcast with somebody and educate those who need to know. That's doing something. Right. Shalea spit a lot of good game earlier, a lot of good knowledge, a lot of good education. We brought some stats out, a few stats, and we'll make sure to bring out more. But the challenge and charge is to get involved. And so that's what we want to charge you with on this afternoon is to get involved, understand what are those statistics for your community and how are they impacting the very people right the next door to you or perhaps on the next block. All right.
Absolutely. Thank you, Laron. My sentiments exactly. Do something. Some of the things that you can do to get involved, you can attend the AABE Scholar Celebration, which is Wednesday, August 17th. We are in the thick of our membership drive. Join a local chapter, join a national organization, get on a committee, educate others. In mid-August, you'll be able to register for the conference, which is May 2nd through the 5th of 2023 in Houston. It's been announced, so you will be able to register in mid-August. And of course, if you like this episode, tune in next time, September 21st at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And if you're anywhere else, you can figure it out, right? Tell a friend to listen in. Again, join your local AABE chapter, support them, support us by sharing this on social media, and get back to work and shake this itis off. Thank you.
Yep. Peace.